Good morning, everybody, friends, colleagues. My sincere thanks to e-Estonia, e-Everyday, e-Everywhere, e-Everything for organising this extremely relevant meeting on children's rights in the context of migration and digital age. It's not the first time that Estonia leads such important discussions. As mentioned by His Excellency Ligi this morning, on the 18th of September, due to the initiative of Estonia, we came together in New York to discuss the rights of refugee and migrant children. So thank you, Estonia, for your strong ongoing commitment. Though the subject of the panel is on refugee children, throughout my presentation, I will refer to both refugee and migrant children. I will use the term children actually on the move. For UNICEF, whether a refugee or a migrant, a child is first and foremost a child. Migration today is a global phenomenon, as we know, as never seen before. This map is the latest from Uprooted report, shows the flows both across regions and within regions in 2015. In 2015, there were 244 million people worldwide living outside their country of birth. 31 million of them were children. If you include internal migrants, the total number of migrants worldwide is around 1 billion. Today, nearly 50 million children have migrated across borders for various reasons. More than half of the children have fled violence and insecurity. Children make up less than a third of the global population, but in fact, they are more than half of the world's refugees. The refugee population is also much younger than the overall migrant population. And today, there are twice as many child refugees as there were only 10 years ago. Movement is both a risk and an opportunity for children. Finding better schools, thrive through better health and more protective environments, but too often they instead lose access to education, health and safe water. They face violence, they face abuse, they face exploitation and separation. Too often moving from one fragile context to the next. We have a strong international legal framework. Children are entitled to all rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. They're also entitled to protection by other international legal instruments, and I've listed a few here. When a child is a refugee, the Refugee Convention of 1951 also provides additional protection. The global situation of children on the move and their protection are the subject of a UNICEF report called Uprooted, the growing crisis for refugee and migrant children. The report actually was launched in September prior to the two summits in New York and aimed at putting the plight of children at the center of the summits. It presents UNICEF's 6 global key policy asks, and they are: protect children, particularly those who are unaccompanied; end migration detention of children, because that should never happen, whatever the circumstances; keep families together; keep all refugee and migrant children learning; work on the underlying causes; and combat xenophobia, discrimination, and marginalization. Now, in brief, just let me focus on a few of the specifics of the response we mounted in Europe, how the crisis unfolded, a few of the key challenges for refugee and migrant children, and what's been done to achieve that. In 2015, over 1 million people crossed the Mediterranean towards Europe. Since the beginning of this year, a further 317,000 people arrived. Mid-March, as the agreement between the EU and Turkey came into force, the number of arrivals significantly declined, but they didn't stop. People were forced into taking alternative routes. There have been more than 596,000 applications by children alone since 2015, and 96,000 asylum claims made by separated and unaccompanied children in Europe to date. It became evident very early that this is a children's crisis. Out of the 1.3 million people who arrived in 2015, that's the population of Estonia, more than 340,000 are children. And accounting for 30% of all deaths at sea, over 550 children have already died since 2015. And as you've seen on the news in the last 48 hours, another 240 people are presumed drowned crossing the Mediterranean, many women and children. Proportion of children arriving alone in Italy has jumped extraordinarily. Now 9 in 10 children arriving in Italy are alone. Between 30 to 40% of unaccompanied children in Italy dropped out of the formal system. The formal system set up to protect them because it was overwhelmed. The same can be said for other countries. So to address the situation, UNICEF is providing direct services to refugee and migrant children, as well as technical assistance to the governments concerned. In the Western Balkans and Greece, we have reached more than 156,000 children since September 2015. More than 1,100 frontline workers were trained on child protection and child rights safeguarding, strengthening national systems for all vulnerable children at the same time. On the ground, our voice was heard as we advocated for women and children to be prioritised in registration queues when boarding trains and buses. We supported the establishment of protection standards in reception and accommodation centres as children became significantly stranded. We advocated country by country, and in Greece helped the government reach a decision not to include separated children, single mothers and other vulnerable groups from return procedures to Turkey. Challenges in protecting the rights and refugees of migrant children still exist, though. They include the following. Today, 27,000 children remain stranded in Greece. Relocation is moving very slowly, and less than 5,000 people have been relocated from Greece. Children are ending up in detention centres for migration processing control purposes. Children stranded in Greece and other European states have family members elsewhere in Europe. Reunification remains seriously slow. And with system failure, unaccompanied and separated children take matters into their own hands, and they slip through many cracks. Many resort to smugglers to reach families in countries of destination, and unfortunately many are exploited and abused on the way. Reception conditions are overstretched and not adequate for children, and there are inadequate safeguards for children. Last but not least, the access to services, including education, including health, remains a challenge, especially in countries hosting large numbers. When the return decision is taken without a best interest assessment, some people just retry again themselves. To respond to the current challenges, UNICEF has UNICEF is engaged in policy dialogue with states and the EU, also in collaboration with UN agencies, our colleagues of Council of Europe and civil society. UNICEF calls upon the European states to speed up and extend relocation schemes, to build more suitable alternatives to migration detention for children, to speed up family reunification. Child protection systems need to be enhanced and equally benefit refugee and migrant children, and sufficient and well-motivated guardians should be available for unaccompanied and separated children. On equal ground with national children, UNICEF calls for child housing safeguarding standards to be put in place. And schools and doctors, etc., should be welcoming and be open to all children. This is a crisis that has taught us to think and work and act in new ways. In 2015, the main challenge was to reach out with very little time and provide services to children on the move. We had to innovate. We made use of IT, for example. WhatsApp was used at border points to inform about population movement and coordinate the response. From the onset, our intervention has been principled and pragmatic. Improved policies and services for refugee and migrant children are improved policies and services for all children. We've also had to enhance coordination with a number of other agencies, and IOM and UNHCR and others. We acknowledge legitimate concerns by host communities against many acts of humanity, citizens supporting refugee and migrant children throughout Europe. Last but not least, every time we communicate on this children's crisis, we give the voice to the children concerned, and make sure that they will never, ever be ignored. Thank you.